I came home early on a Thursday and heard water running upstairs. I opened the bathroom door and saw my wife of 24 years in the tub with her brother-in-law. I set my wedding ring down on the sink and quietly locked the front door. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. At 56, you don't have the energy for those big movie scenes. You just stand there looking at two people you thought you knew, and you feel something inside you crack like old paint on a porch rail. Sharon screamed when she saw me grabbing for a towel. Dale just stared, eyes wide, his face red from the hot water and sheer stupidity. I closed the door without a word, walked downstairs, set my ring on the kitchen counter next to the radio, and slid the deadbolt on the front door. Then I picked up my phone and called his wife. "Carol," I said when she answered, "it's Ray. You need to come over, now. You need to see this yourself." That was the moment my old life ended. But to really understand how I got there, you'd have to start a few hours earlier in the same kitchen on what looked like an ordinary Thursday in Rockford, Illinois. My name is Ray Collier. I've lived in Rockford my whole life. I'm 56 years old, and until that day, I thought I was just another married guy riding out the back half of life work bills. Church on Sunday, maybe a grandkid or two someday if we were lucky. That Thursday morning started the way most mornings did in our house on Auburn Street. The alarm went off at 5:30. I rolled out of bed, knees popping, pulled on my work jeans and a flannel shirt, and followed the smell of coffee downstairs. Sharon was at the kitchen table wrapped in her old blue robe, drinking Folgers out of the white mug our church gave out last Christmas. Grace Lutheran Church was printed on the side in fading green letters. The little AM radio on the counter was tuned to Rook, some guy talking about how the rain was going to hang around all day along the Rock River. "Morning," I said, pouring myself a cup. She didn't look up from her phone. "Morning." That was us lately. 24 years of marriage boiled down to shared weather reports and quiet chewing. No big fights, but no big laughs either. I sat across from her and spooned sugar into my cup. "You working at the office today?" "Half day," she said. "I told Carol I'd help her with some paperwork, so Dale's supposed to swing by later, look at that leaky faucet upstairs." She smiled when she said his name. It was quick, but I noticed. The kind of smile I hadn't seen pointed at me in a long time. "Faucet in the hall bath?" I asked. "Yeah, it's been dripping for weeks. You keep saying you'll look at it, and then you don't." There wasn't any real bite in her voice, just that dull, tired edge I'd gotten used to. "I can get to it this weekend," I said. "Dale's already planning to be on this side of town. It's fine, Ray. Don't worry about it." I took a sip of coffee and let it go. You learn which hills are worth dying on. A faucet isn't one of them. I remember looking at her across that table and thinking how different she looked from the girl I married at Grace Lutheran. Back then, she had long dark hair and a laugh that filled the church hall. 24 years later, her hair was shorter, streaked with gray. She still looked good, just distant, like she'd walked a few miles ahead of me and never turned around. By 7, I was in my truck, my old Chevy Silverado, heading toward the plant on the south side. Same route as always down Auburn, past the strip mall that used to be a Kmart. I've been a maintenance supervisor there for 15 years. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady. Around 11, everything changed. One of the main machines seized up with a horrible clanging sound. We shut it down, checked motors and belts. Turned out a part we needed was back ordered. The plant manager looked at me and said, "We're dead in the water till tomorrow, Ray. Send whoever you can home. We're not paying folks to stand around." I sent a couple of guys home, logged what I needed to, and then he glanced at my time card. "Go on home yourself," he said. "No point hanging out here all day." It felt strange walking out of the plant before lunch. I swung by Schnucks on the way, picked up a carton of tomato soup and a loaf of bread. Figured I'd surprise Sharon, maybe have a quiet lunch together for once. Rockford looked gray and wet as I drove. Wipers squeaked back and forth. The radio crackled about more showers rolling in. Just another Midwestern afternoon. When I turned onto our street, the houses were all the same as always, little 1.5-story places with chain-link fences and kids' bikes in the yards. I pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and sat there for a second, listening to the tick of the cooling motor. Inside the house was quiet. I set the grocery bag on the counter next to the church mug. The radio was still on low, now playing some oldies song from the 70s. I called out Sharon. No answer. That's when I heard it, the faint sound of water running upstairs. Not the steady drip of a leaky faucet, a fuller sound like the tub filling up. and under it something else. A muffled laugh, a man's voice, her voice softer than it had been all morning. I stood there with my hand on the back of a kitchen chair, and something cold slid through me. Not a flash of hot anger, just a cold line running straight down my spine. I walked to the bottom of the stairs, every step on the old carpet sounding too loud. The door to the hall bathroom at the top was half closed. Light spilled out in a narrow stripe across the hallway floor. I think I knew right then. I think some part of me had known for months. My hand didn't shake when I reached for the doorknob. I opened the door. Steam rolled out, first warm and smelling like Sharon's lavender bubble bath. Then the picture came into focus. Sharon in the tub, shoulders, bare, eyes wide, and right beside her, knees sticking up out of the water, was her brother-in-law, Dale Harper, clutching at a washcloth like it could save his soul. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The only sound was the faucet still running. "Ray," she gasped, grabbing for the edge of the tub, trying to pull the curtain across them. What are you doing home?" Dale's face went red. It's not." I looked at them for maybe 2 seconds. That was all I needed. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I just reached over, turned off the faucet, and said quietly, "Don't go anywhere." Then I closed the door, walked downstairs, and set my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. I slipped my phone from my pocket and stared at it for a few seconds before I could make myself dial. My hand wasn't shaking. My breathing wasn't fast. Everything inside me had gone still, like the quiet that settles over the Rock River before a storm breaks. I tapped Carol's number. She answered on the second ring, cheerful at first. "Hey, Ray, everything okay?" "Carol," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "You need to come over, right now." Why is Sharon all right?" "You need to see this yourself." There was a beat of silence on the line. Then the faint clatter of keys. "I'm coming," she said. Her voice changed, lower clipped. "I'm not coming alone." I hung up and stood in the middle of the kitchen. The rain pattered lightly against the window over the sink. The W-Rock announcer had moved on to a story about potholes on Riverside Boulevard. The house smelled like coffee gone cold and old lavender steam drifting down from upstairs. I looked at my wedding ring on the counter. A small, dull circle. 24 years condensed into a half-inch of worn gold. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I walked to the living room and sat down in my father's old recliner. I folded my hands together and waited. No pacing, no praying, just waiting, and thinking about how a man could live with someone for 2 decades and not see the road they were drifting down. Maybe I should have seen it. Maybe the signs were there. The late nights helping Carol with paperwork. The sudden care Sharon took with her hair and makeup, like she was getting ready for the woman she used to be. The way she smiled when she talked about Dale, small at first, then growing over time. But you never want to believe you've been made a fool of. Not at 56. Not after you've spent a lifetime trying to do right. The sound of tires crunching on our wet driveway snapped me out of it. The front door banged open and Carol's voice tore through the house like a tornado whipping across a soybean field. "Where is she?" I stood up, upstairs, bathroom. But Carol wasn't listening anymore. She was already charging up the stairs, small, fast steps fueled by 20 years of marriage and maybe 20 years of suspicion. Behind her came another set of steps, slower, more measured. I turned and saw a woman I didn't know step inside, wiping rain from her glasses. She wore a gray blazer and carried a leather folder under her arm. "You must be Ray," she said. "I'm Janice, family attorney." Of course, Carol brought a lawyer. She snapped the folder open with one practice flick. "Let's go see what we're dealing with." Upstairs, the shouting had begun. I followed Janice up the steps and found Carol standing in the bathroom doorway, pointing at her husband, still in the tub towel, clutched to his chest like a shield. Sharon had pulled a robe around herself and was crying, real tears or fake ones, hard to tell. "How long?" Carol screamed at Dale. "How long have you been making a fool of me?" "It's not, Carol, sweetheart, this isn't," Dale stuttered. Sharon tried to jump in. "This isn't what anyone thinks." Janice spoke over everyone, calm as a judge. "Nobody say another word." The room fell quiet. She lifted her phone, snapped 3 pictures, click, 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 then turned to me. "Ray, how long were you downstairs before calling Carol?" 10 minutes, I said. "Good," she replied. "Plenty of time for a judge to consider it a cooling off period. You didn't act in anger. Well done." Carol barked a laugh, sharp and bitter. "See, at least someone here has some sense." Sharon wiped her face. Ray, can we please talk alone? No, Janice said. You had your private time with someone else. Sharon shot her a glare. Who are you? I'm the woman who's about to make sure Ray and Carol don't lose a penny in this mess, Janice replied. It was around then that Dale made his next brilliant move. He reached for his phone still on the edge of the sink and tried to sneak a text message. Maybe to beg me not to tell, maybe to warn Sharon's sister, or maybe he was just the kind of fool who thought he could spin this in his favor. Carol snatched the phone from him, looked at the screen and let out a disgusted laugh. Oh, look, she said. He already sent you a text, Ray. She shoved the phone into my hands. There it was. Sorry, Ray, it was a mistake. Pic attached. Attached was a selfie of Dale face dripping wrapped in the pink floral towel I remembered Sharon buying at Woodman's back in 1999 during a big sidewalk sale. He must have taken the photo in panic, hoping to explain something, apologize, who knows what went on in that brain. I looked at the screen, looked at Dale, and something inside me wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because sometimes you reach a point where the absurdity is too much to process any other way. I handed the phone to Janice. She glanced at it and smirked. Honey, she said, addressing me like an aunt at Thanksgiving, this man is giving you a gift. What, I asked? Evidence, she said. At our age, revenge isn't screaming. It's paperwork. Down the hall, Sharon stepped forward, hands clasped. Ray, please, don't do this. We can fix it. We can go to counseling. Carol spun on her. He found you in the tub, Sharon. Sharon sobbed harder. I made a mistake. Janice slid her phone into her blazer. Ladies, let's not cheapen the word mistake. I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity, like a camera lens snapping into focus. I wasn't going to swing. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to plead. Whatever Ray Collier had been that morning, the quiet, tired man sipping coffee in the kitchen, he wasn't coming back. I looked at Sharon, really looked at her, and all I saw was distance, decisions she'd made long before this day ever came. I'm leaving, I said. You won't hear from me tonight. She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. Downstairs, I grabbed my jacket and keys. As I walked out the door, I heard Carol's voice echoing through the house like thunder. Dale Harper, you've been cheating on me since Clinton was president. The screen door slammed behind me. I drove to the VFW post 5E149, the one near Riverside, ordered a Bud Light, sat in the back corner. A couple of the older guys were talking about their time in Vietnam while the Cubs game played on the TV above the bar. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel completely alone. I woke up the next morning in a place I hadn't slept in more than 20 years, a cheap motel off East State Street, the kind of place where the curtains never quite close and the heater clicks all night. My back ached from the lumpy mattress, and for a moment I forgot why I was there. Then the memories slammed back in. The tub, the towel, the look on Sharon's face, the look on Dale's. I swung my legs off the bed and sat there for a while, staring at the carpet, thinking about the kind of man I had been 24 hours earlier, steady, predictable, married. Now all three of those words felt like they belonged to someone else. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Sharon, 2 texts from Dale, both unread, 1 message from Carol. Ray, call me when you're awake. Janice has ideas. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear those ideas, but doing nothing felt worse. I checked out of the motel and headed toward the only place I could think to go, the old auto parts shop just off North Main Street. My buddy Lenny owned it, and years ago he'd renovated the upstairs into a tiny apartment for his nephew. The nephew moved to Wisconsin for a job last year, and Lenny kept the place empty ever since. When I walked in, Lenny took one look at my face, put down the carburetor he was cleaning, and said, "You need a place to stay." "Yeah," I said. "You can have the upstairs. Don't worry about rent right now. We'll work something out." I nodded, feeling the kind of gratitude you don't have words for. The apartment was small, 1 room with a kitchenette, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. The window overlooked Main Street. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the pavement dark and shiny. It wasn't much, but it was somewhere I could breathe. I dropped my bag inside and sat on the edge of the narrow bed. My whole life was changing, but in that moment, the silence felt like a gift. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. Carol, again. I answered. "Hey." "Ray," she said, voice steady but strained. "Are you somewhere safe?" "I'm fine, at Lenny's place." "Good, listen." She hesitated and I could hear her take a deep breath. Janice and I met this morning. We found some things. You need to come down to the diner on Riverside. She'll explain. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I'll be there in 20, I said. The diner smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee, same as it had for 30 years. Carol was sitting in a booth near the back, hands wrapped around a mug. Janice was across from her, tapping a pen against a stack of papers. Both of them looked up when I approached. Janice motioned for me to sit. Ray, we have developments. Sounds like trouble, I said. It is for them, Janice replied, not for you. She slid a piece of paper toward me. A bank statement. My name. Sharon's signature scribbled on a withdrawal slip. This is from Rock River Community Credit Union, she said. Sharon tried to freeze your debit card last night. I sighed. Figures. But here's the interesting part, Janice continued. She didn't know that the credit union keeps signed withdrawal slips on file. I requested copies. Look at the dates. I scanned them. Small withdrawals. $20 here, 40 there, another 30. It didn't look like much until I noticed where the money was going. A separate account under Dale's name. For how long, I asked. Janice leaned back. Best we can tell, at least a year. Carol clenched her jaw. He told me he was short on cash because of car repairs. I paid for half of those repairs. She took a shaky breath. I should have seen it, she whispered. I looked at Carol, this woman who'd run up my stairs like a storm the day before, and realized she wasn't just angry. She was gutted, betrayed on a level I understood too well. We're not done, Janice said, flipping open her folder again. There's more. She held up a burnt scrap of paper, edges blackened, lettering half gone. This was in your house, Ray, under the bathroom sink. I took it carefully. It looked like part of a greeting card, a birthday card maybe. The writing was in Sharon's handwriting, and beneath it a line that made my chest tighten. Just like we joked about that summer in Galena. I frowned. We never went to Galena. No, Carol said, voice flat. But Dale and Sharon did, with my sister's kids, 6 years ago. A sour taste filled my mouth. How long do you think it's been going on? I asked quietly. Janice folded her hands. Long enough that we don't treat this like a slip-up. We treat it like a pattern, a plan, and the best part is, their own carelessness is handing you everything you need. I sat back, letting the words settle. Dale's towel selfie, bank transfers, burnt card, the tub. 24 years of marriage dissolving into a series of stupid, reckless choices. Okay, I said, so what happens now? Carol leaned forward. We hit them publicly. Janice nodded. There's an event at the Grace Lutheran Church Hall next week, right? Yeah, I said, Sharon's nephew's confirmation party. Perfect, Janice said. Everyone who matters to them will be there. Family, neighbors, church friends. We'll present everything calmly, legally, and in public view. Carol cracked her knuckles. They humiliated us in private. We'll show the truth in public. I took a slow breath. It wasn't revenge in the way younger men picture revenge, shouting, throwing punches. This was quieter, sharper, a cold kind of justice that didn't leave bruises, only consequences. Janice gathered her papers. One last thing. This will work only if you stay calm. Sharon thrives on emotional chaos. If you yell, she wins. I nodded. I can stay calm. And I meant it. The anger had cooled into something harder, steadier. A man doesn't survive 56 years without learning to breathe through the hurt. As we got up to leave, Carol touched my shoulder. Ray, whatever happens, you're not alone in this. Not anymore. I didn't know how much that meant until that moment. Sometimes the loudest comfort in the world is someone simply saying they see your pain. I walked out of the diner into the cloudy Rockford afternoon, feeling more anchored than I had since yesterday. I wasn't healed, not even close. But for the first time since opening that bathroom door, I knew exactly what I had to do. I spent the next week living in that small apartment above Lenny's auto shop, listening to the hum of traffic on North Main Street at night and the clatter of tools from below during the day. It wasn't home, but it was quiet enough for me to hear my own thoughts, which was something I hadn't done in years. Each night I sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker over the wet pavement. Some nights I cried. Other nights I didn't feel anything at all. But every night the same sentence circled in my mind. 24 years, and this is where I ended up. Still, the plan gave me something to hold on to. Janice called every evening to fine-tune the details. Carol checked in too, not angry anymore, but focused, determined. We were two people who had walked through the same fire. It created a kind of bond I never expected. By Wednesday morning, I was ready. The confirmation party for Sharon's nephew Caleb was set for Sunday evening in the Grace Lutheran Church Hall. I went to talk to Pastor Mike 2 days beforehand. I didn't tell him everything pastors hear enough misery as it is, but I asked him straight out if it would be inappropriate to show up. He studied me quietly for a moment, then said, "Ray, if you believe your presence is honest and not vengeful, you come. Truth shouldn't hide." I didn't realize how deeply I needed to hear those words. By Sunday afternoon, the sky over Rockford had turned a soft pale blue, one of those calm Midwest evenings that almost tricks you into thinking nothing bad could ever happen in the world. I dressed simple, clean jeans, a pressed button-down shirt, the boots I saved for church. Not a man trying to impress anyone, just a man trying to stand upright. When I arrived at the church hall, the parking lot was already half full. Families carrying casserole dishes, kids in pressed shirts, old couples smiling and shuffling toward the doors. I stood outside for a few seconds, breathing in the cool air. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, too steady, like the moment before a long-delayed storm breaks open. Inside the hall was decorated with blue and silver balloons, folding tables covered with white cloths, trays of food lined up near the kitchen. The smell of meatballs, potato salad, and cherry jello carried through the room. Sharon was standing near the refreshments table, talking animatedly with 2 women from the choir. Dale stood beside her, dressed like he was auditioning for a church brochure. When he saw me, the color drained from his face. Sharon's smile faltered. I watched her lips form the words, "What is he doing here?" I didn't react. I didn't wave. I simply walked in slowly like a man who had every right to be there. And I did. Carol spotted me first. She approached with a nod, stiff but reassuring. Behind her was Janice, carrying a tidy folder under her arm and wearing a calm, unreadable expression that somehow made me feel 10 times braver. "You ready?" Carol asked. "As ready as a man can be," I said. Janice touched my elbow. "Remember, don't raise your voice. Let the truth do the shouting." A few minutes later, Pastor Mike called everyone together to congratulate Caleb. The room gathered near the front plates of food in hand murmurs dying down as he began to speak. But before he could finish, Carol cleared her throat. Loud, sharp. "Pastor," she said, "we need a moment." Sharon turned toward us, eyes narrowing. "Carol, what are you doing?" Carol didn't answer. Instead, she held up a stack of papers. "This," she announced, "is what your husband's been up to, and who he's been up to it with." The room froze. Sharon's face drained of color. Carol stopped. "Not here." "Oh yes," Carol said, "here." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few whispers rippled through the hall. Janice stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. In the interest of honesty, she began, "Ray and Carol have chosen to present the truth about what's been happening behind closed doors." She opened the folder. The first page was a photograph taken by Janice of Dale and Sharon in the bathtub, towels, clutch, steam still swirling. A collective gasp filled the room. Someone dropped a fork. Sharon lunged toward Janice. "Give me that!" But Janice stepped aside smoothly, and the next page came out, the bank statement. The transfers, dates, signatures, lines connecting one betrayal to another. Then came the burnt scrap of the birthday card, the reference to Galena, the years of deceit drawn into sharp focus. Dale made a strangled sound. "Carol, please." "Oh, shut up," Carol snapped. "You've said enough." I didn't speak. I didn't move. I stood quietly beside Janice as each piece of evidence came to light. And then came the moment I'll remember for the rest of my life. Dale lunged. Not at me, not at Carol. He lunged at Janice's folder, arms outstretched, face twisted, trying to snatch the papers before the next one could be shown. But in his panic, he forgot one thing, the giant bowl of Aunt Lorraine's cherry jello salad sitting right on the edge of the buffet table. His foot hit the table leg. The bowl wobbled. Then it flipped. And Dale Harper, 52 years old, father of 2, self-proclaimed handyman, went down like a sack of potatoes. Right onto the tile floor, covered neck to waist in red jello and whipped cream papers fluttering like confused birds around him. A few people gasped. A few more tried not to laugh. Pastor Mike closed his eyes and whispered something that might have been a prayer. Then from the front table, an elderly woman, Mrs. Jensen, 80 years old, hard of hearing, but sharp as a tack, leaned over to her friend and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Well, about time someone stood up to those two." The place erupted, not in cheers, not in boos, just the raw, stunned noise of truth breaking open like a thunderclap. Sharon began to cry. "Ray, you didn't have to humiliate me in front of everybody." I turned to her, and for once I didn't feel anger, I felt clarity. "Sharon," I said quietly, "I didn't humiliate you. You humiliated yourself the day you forgot what 24 years meant." The room went silent again, completely silent. Even the kids stopped fidgeting. Then, like a final punctuation mark, a sheriff's deputy, one of Carol's cousins, stepped forward and handed Dale a folded set of documents. "Mr. Harper, he said you'll want to read those. Financial investigation. You'll be hearing from the county soon." Dale looked like a man drowning. I didn't wait for the rest. I didn't need to. I stepped away from the crowd, walked calmly to the exit, and pushed open the heavy glass doors of the church hall. Outside, the air smelled like wet grass and fresh flowers. The sky over Rockford was starting to streak with orange as the sun went down. And for the first time in a long time, I felt tall again. I didn't go back to the apartment right away. Instead, I walked slowly around the church grounds, letting the cool evening settle into my bones. My hands were steady. My breathing was slow. It felt like someone had finally cut a rope that had been wrapped tight around my chest for years. Behind me, I could still hear the muffled commotion inside the hall. Voices rising, chairs scraping, someone shouting Dale's name. But all of that was fading now. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. I headed toward my truck parked beneath an old oak tree on the far side of the lot. As I climbed in and shut the door, the quiet inside the cab felt like a blessing. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel and let out a long breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt free. And at 56, freedom hits different. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes like a warm blanket over tired shoulders. The next morning, I met Janice at the Rockford County Courthouse to file the initial paperwork. She moved through the process like she'd done it 1,000 times, explaining everything in simple, direct language. I didn't have to ask twice. She anticipated every question. "Ray," she said as we stepped out onto the courthouse steps, "you handled yourself with dignity last night. Not many people could have done that." I didn't feel dignified, I told her. I felt numb. "That's part of dignity," she said. "Staying steady when your whole world is cracking." We parted ways in the parking lot. She gave me a firm handshake before getting into her car. Carol called me that afternoon. She sounded exhausted but lighter, like someone who'd finally cried out 3 decades of frustration. "Ray, thank you," she said, "for standing there with me." "I didn't do much," I answered. "You did exactly enough." She went quiet for a moment. "He's moving out today," she said finally. "I told him to pack a bag and leave. I don't want him in my house another hour." I nodded even though she couldn't see it. "You'll get through it." "We both will," she said. "Maybe we should grab coffee sometime next week. Not like a date, just as two people who survived the same storm." I smiled softly. I'd like that. A week later, I moved back into my house. Not because Sharon moved out gracefully, she didn't. Not because it felt comfortable, it didn't. I moved back because it was mine, and because Janice made very sure the court understood whose name was on the deed, whose money had paid the bills, and whose trust had been broken. The house looked different the moment I walked in. Quieter, a little emptier, but also a little more mine. I spent the first 2 hours walking through each room, opening windows to let in the autumn air. The curtains fluttered like they'd been waiting for something to shake them awake. In the hall bathroom, the one where everything had fallen apart, I stood for a long time staring at the tub. I half expected the memories to sting like lemon juice on a cut. But surprisingly, they didn't. They were just memories, sharp ones, sure, but not wounds anymore. I noticed something sticking out from under the sink. When I pulled it out, my breath caught in my throat. That same pink floral towel Dale had wrapped himself in. I held it for a few seconds. It was soft frayed on the edges. Sharon used to wrap it around her hair after coloring it. I didn't throw it in the trash. I didn't burn it. I folded it neatly, placed it in a paper bag, and drove it straight to the donation box outside VFW Post 5149. Let someone else decide its fate. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. Over the next month, life settled into something quiet but steady. I got used to cooking for myself again. Some nights I made simple things, grilled cheese soup from Schnucks. Other nights I tried harder meals. I even learned to make a halfway decent meatloaf, the kind my mother used to make on Tuesday nights when I was a kid. On my third attempt, it finally turned out right, crispy edges, sweet glaze, the whole works. I sliced off a portion and walked it next door to Mr. Jenkins, the widower, who'd lived alone since 2015. He opened the door slowly, adjusting his glasses when he saw me. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Ray Collier bringing dinner. Should I check if the world's ending?" "Just thought you might like a plate," I told him. He sniffed at, eyebrows raising. "Smells like Tuesday night back in '78. I laughed. High praise. We ended up talking on his porch for an hour. About the Bears, about the weather, about nothing and everything. It was the first time in a long time I enjoyed the silence between words. The divorce finalized 3 months later. I didn't celebrate. I didn't mourn. I just breathed a long, steady breath that felt like it stretched back over 24 years and finally let go. One evening, as I sat at my kitchen table, the sun setting orange over the neighborhood, I found myself holding my old wedding ring. I turned it in my fingers, felt its weight. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It was just a ring, and I was just a man who'd learned something hard and important. You can lose the person you build a life with and still rebuild your life. You can fall at 56 and still get back up, sometimes slower, sometimes shakier, but stronger. Not because you want revenge, but because you want peace. I set the ring down, gently stood up, and opened the window above the sink. Cool air drifted in, carrying the smell of cut grass and someone grilling down the street. I whispered almost to myself. Turns out, starting over at 56 isn't the end. It's just the first honest day of the rest of your life. And I believed it. If you're over 50 and this story gave you a little strength today, if it reminded you that dignity still matters, or that you're never too old to rise back up, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe, share this story, or leave a comment about your own journey. Maybe your voice will give someone else the courage they need. Thanks for listening.